A 5-year-old girl walks away from her mother. She never comes back. 48 hours later, she's still missing. 52 years later, she's found alive. And when she's found, everyone realizes she was never lost. She was stolen. This is the story of Lauren Bennett. And this is the story of how a child can disappear from a crowded room in broad daylight, and nobody, not the police, not the detectives, not the family, would understand what really happened until DNA matched her to a woman living across the country who never knew her real name. June 18, 1972. 2:15 p.m. First Baptist Church, Honolulu, Hawaii. Lauren Marie Bennett was 5 years old. Born on Valentine's Day. She wore a pale pink dress with white daisies that afternoon. Her mother remembers because she'd hand-sewn it. Her father remembers because he'd told Lauren she looked like sunshine. She'd laughed, that high, uninhibited laugh that only small children make. The church fellowship hall was full. Not crowded, dangerous full. Safe full. The kind of full where everyone knows everyone, where children run freely, where the worst thing you worry about is spilled juice on the carpet. Lauren tugged her mother's sleeve. "I have to use the bathroom." Her mother nodded. Every parent there understood the 5-year-old bladder urgency. "Go ahead, baby. Come right back." Lauren walked toward the bathroom. She never reached it. When her mother checked 5 minutes later, the stall was empty. Terrifyingly, impossibly empty. By 3 p.m., every adult in that church was searching. By 6 p.m., police had arrived. By midnight, 150 volunteers were combing the island with flashlights and photographs of a smiling kindergartner. Nobody would find her. Nobody would even know what to look for. And in 2024, when she was finally found, alive, healthy, living under a different name, the truth would shatter a family's understanding of love, betrayal, family, and the person you thought you knew. This is how a ghost comes back to life. Before that Sunday, before the vanishing, before the police and volunteers and decades of unsolved anguish, there was just a little girl living an ordinary life. Lauren Marie Bennett. Born February 14, 1967. Valentine's Day. Her mother, Dorothy, never tired of mentioning it. "My Valentine," she'd say, even when Lauren was 5, even when she was 10, even when she was 5 again in her mother's fractured memory, trapped at that age forever. The Bennett family lived on Kuhio Avenue in Honolulu. Her father, Robert, worked in tourism. A good man, steady man, the kind of man who came home at 5:30 every day and asked about your day. Her mother stayed home. Kept the house immaculate. Knew the names of everyone on their street. There were 2 other children, a brother, 5 years older, and a sister, 3 years younger. A middle child. That's what Lauren was. Unremarkable in all the ways that happy children are. Her kindergarten teacher called her observant. Not smart. Observant. She noticed birds. She noticed how light changed on the ocean. She asked questions that adults couldn't answer. Why is the sky blue but the ocean isn't? If clouds are water, why don't they fall down? Where do mothers go when they die? That last question came after her maternal grandmother had passed 6 months before the social. The church was important to this family. Not in a hellfire way. In a community way. It was the spine of their social world. Every Sunday. Every social. Every gathering. Everyone knew them. Everyone loved them. First Baptist Church wasn't fancy. It was just a safe place. The kind of place where you didn't worry about your children. Where trust was the default setting. Where saying, "I'm going to the bathroom," was the most normal thing in the world, and nobody thought twice about a 5-year-old going alone. There's a photograph taken that morning. Before church. Lauren in her pink dress with white daisies, smiling at the camera. Her hair is combed. Her dress is perfect. She is unaware that this is the last photograph of her childhood. Her mother would keep that photograph on her nightstand for the rest of her life. She would look at it every morning. She would wonder about the version of Lauren captured in that image. The Lauren who didn't know yet. The Lauren who was about to disappear. But that was still hours away. For now, there was just breakfast and getting dressed, and the drive to church, and the feeling that this Sunday would be like every other Sunday. It wasn't. The bathroom at First Baptist Church was at the end of the hallway. 2 stalls. A small sink. A window that didn't open. When Dorothy Bennett checked the time at 2:20 p.m., it had been 5 minutes. When she checked at 2:25, it had been 10. Something felt wrong. The way you feel wrong before you know why. A vibration in your nervous system that says something is not right. She walked to the bathroom. Empty. She checked the stall. But she knocked. Nothing. She checked the second stall. Also locked. She turned the door handle for the second stall and it opened. Empty. A cold realization, Lauren had never made it to the bathroom. She'd disappeared somewhere in the 25 steps between her mother and the bathroom door. By 2:35 p.m., every adult in that fellowship hall was awake to crisis. By 2:45 p.m., Robert Bennett had left work and was driving to the church. By 3:15 p.m., police were taking statements. By 3:47 p.m., Detective Raymond Martinez arrived at the scene, and the search for Lauren Bennett became official. But the real search had already begun. Volunteers materialized from nowhere. Neighbors. Church members. People who'd never met Lauren but felt the weight of the missing child anyway. By 5 p.m., there were 70 people. By 8 p.m., there were 150. They moved through Honolulu with flashlights and photographs, calling Lauren's name into the gathering darkness. The volunteers followed every clue. A witness reported seeing a small girl in a pink dress near the beach, a mile away. Search teams raced in that direction. They found nothing. Another witness reported a car with out-of-state plates. Another claimed she'd seen Lauren buying candy at a small store. Each report sent searchers in new directions. Each direction dead-ended into nothing. By midnight on June 18th, the church social had transformed into the largest missing child operation Honolulu had seen in years. Dorothy Bennett couldn't move. She sat in her living room wearing the same clothes she'd worn to the social. Robert sat beside her. They held hands. They didn't speak. There was nothing to say. Their daughter had walked away from her mother's side in a crowded church and simply ceased to exist. By Sunday night, as volunteers spread across the island, police had already begun interviewing everyone at the social. Had anyone seen anything unusual? Had anyone noticed a stranger? Had anyone seen Lauren talking to someone? The answers were all no. Everyone saw nothing. Everyone knew nothing. A child had vanished in the presence of 200 witnesses and left no trace. By Monday morning, the case was front-page news. Missing child. Honolulu police seek kindergartner. By Tuesday, the National Guard had been called. By Wednesday, the FBI was involved. And by Friday, 1 week later, the search had yielded nothing. No body. No ransom demand. No evidence. Just, a girl had disappeared. And nobody knew why. A missing child is a rupture in the social fabric. It reveals the fragility of safety. It shatters the assumption that bad things happen to other people, in other places, not here, not now, not to us. By July 1972, Honolulu had fractured. Rumors metastasized through beauty salons and grocery stores. A man had been seen near the church at 2:30 p.m. That man was never found. A car matching an unusual description had been spotted on a road heading toward the airport. Police chased that lead into nothing. Some people whispered about the Bennett family. Was there trouble at home? Was Robert having an affair? Was Dorothy neglectful? Were they hiding something? None of it was true. All of it felt true. The gossip followed a predictable script. Find someone to blame. If you could blame someone, you could restore the illusion that this was controllable. If the Bennetts were bad parents, then good parents, like you, wouldn't face this. If there was a serial predator in Honolulu, then at least the danger had a face. At least you could protect yourself against it. But there was no face. There was no explanation. There was just, a girl vanished. Parents responded by constricting their children's worlds. Children who'd roamed neighborhoods freely were now escorted to school, waited for at pickup, and questioned obsessively about their whereabouts. The island's easy trust evaporated. Locks were installed on gates. Childhoods ended. The church itself became a wound. Some members deepened their faith. God was testing them, they said. Others abandoned it entirely. How could God allow a child to be taken from his own house? How could faith survive in a world where Sunday school led to abduction? Attendance dropped. Tithes stopped. The fellowship hall where Lauren had vanished was kept locked. One woman who'd been at the social, a stranger to the Bennett family, would carry guilt for the rest of her life. She gave an interview years later. I was standing near the bathroom. I could have seen something. I could have heard something. But I was thinking about what I'd wear to dinner that night. And while I was thinking about my dress, someone was taking a child. How do you live with that? By August, a psychic claimed she'd sensed Lauren's location. Police followed the lead. Nothing. By September, a man called claiming to have taken Lauren. He confessed to a list of crimes. He had never taken Lauren. He was a fantasist seeking attention. By October 1972, the search had slowed. The volunteers had evaporated back into their regular lives. The newspapers had moved on to new stories. The Bennett family was left with silence. A silence that would stretch for 52 years. Detective Raymond Martinez was 42 years old when the Lauren Bennett case landed on his desk. He'd been with the Honolulu Police Department for 18 years. He'd solved 87 cases. He was good at his job. He believed in evidence, in procedure, in the logic that if you followed the facts, they would lead you to truth. The facts of Lauren Bennett's disappearance led him nowhere. He interviewed 247 people in the first year. He drove over 3,000 miles chasing leads that dissolved into nothing. He spoke to known sex offenders in the Honolulu area. He tracked transients. He interviewed family acquaintances. He subpoenaed phone records and analyzed them for hours, looking for patterns that didn't exist. By 1974, a year and a half after Lauren's disappearance, Martinez was convinced he was missing something obvious. Some crucial detail that, if he could just find it, would crack the case open. He would walk through First Baptist Church at 2:15 p.m., retracing the 5-year-old steps, trying to imagine her thought process, her movements, her fear. He knew it was futile. He did it anyway. Every morning, Martinez arrived at the precinct early. He made black coffee. He spent the first hour reviewing the Bennett file. The papers had worn thin at the edges from handling. He'd memorized entire sections. He could recite witness statements verbatim. None of it led anywhere. His colleagues began to avoid the topic. They knew what it meant, that the Bennett case had entered that territory where obsession lives, where detectives go to lose themselves. By 1977, the case had gone cold. By 1980, it had become a legend, the case that couldn't be solved. The missing child that disappeared into myth. Martinez would stay with the police department for 16 more years. He solved 143 cases total in his career. But everyone who knew him understood that the Bennett case was the one that had broken something in him. The one he couldn't solve. The one that had taught him the limits of his own competence. In 1985, Martinez said something to a younger detective that revealed the depth of his torment. I don't know what happened to her. Nobody does. And that's what kills me every day I walk into this office. There is a child out there somewhere, alive or dead, I don't know, and I couldn't find her. I had training. I had resources. I had 200 witnesses. And I couldn't find her. By 1993, when Martinez retired at age 63, the Lauren Bennett file went into a cabinet with hundreds of other unsolved cases. He left a note in the file. Every lead has been exhausted. The perpetrator may never be identified. The case remains open. He had no idea that the perpetrator had been walking freely for 21 years. He had no idea that the victim was alive. He had no idea that 40 more years would pass before technology would catch up to the truth. For 4 decades, Lauren Bennett existed in a kind of frozen purgatory. Neither alive nor dead in the public consciousness. Not solved. Not forgotten. Just suspended in time, like an insect in amber. Detective Martinez retired in 1993 and took the case with him, still unsolved, still haunting, still burning in a corner of his mind that never quieted. New detectives inherited the file. They reviewed it with the hopeful energy of youth. They had new leads to chase. They had resources Martinez had lacked. They had computers. They had databases. None of it led anywhere. The case was digitized in 1999. All 2,347 pages of investigation scanned into a computer database. The physical file remained in a cabinet, gathering dust. Every few years, a detective would pull it. Every time, the same conclusion: no new leads. No new evidence. The case was effectively closed. Lauren's mother, Dorothy, never redecorated the house. The same furniture sat in the same places. The same photographs of Lauren, frozen at age 5, hung on the same walls. She'd stopped expecting answers by the 1990s. But she never stopped expecting her daughter to walk through the door. Every June 18th, Dorothy would sit in the living room and remember. Her husband, Robert, would sit with her. They wouldn't speak about it. They'd just sit. This became their ritual. A moment of private catastrophe, unmarked by the rest of the world. By 2000, when Dorothy died, she had spent 28 years in a state of suspended grief. She'd had a job. She'd had a life. But her daughter's absence had carved a hole that nothing could fill. At her funeral, people said Dorothy had never fully recovered. How could she? Her daughter was still missing. Robert lived longer. He attended the June 18th vigil alone for years. In his 90s, he became frail. He would sit by the window and look out at the street, sometimes forgetting why he was sad. Sometimes remembering. When he did remember, it seemed to hurt more, as if grief had sharpened with age rather than softened. Journalists would periodically resurrect the case. Where is Lauren Bennett? New audiences would ask, excited by the mystery, unaware that generations before them had asked the same question and found no answer. News outlets ran anniversary stories. True crime podcasters devoted episodes to it. The case had become famous for being unsolvable. In 2005, Detective Martinez died. He was 75 years old. The obituary mentioned that he'd worked the Lauren Bennett case, Hawaii's most famous unsolved disappearance. It didn't mention the weight of that failure. It didn't mention the private anguish. By 2020, Lauren would have been 53 years old. She should have had a life, a career, maybe children of her own. But in the minds of those who remembered her, she remained 5. Forever in that pink dress with white daisies. Forever running from the church social. Forever caught in that moment before she vanished. What nobody knew was that ghosts, as it turns out, have a way of refusing to stay dead. In November 2023, Detective Sarah Chen received the Lauren Bennett case file. She was 34 years old. The file was 51 years old. She was a child when this case began. Most people her age had never heard of it. Chen read through the digitized documents with fresh eyes. A DNA sample had been collected from Lauren's hairbrush decades earlier, standard procedure, though DNA analysis hadn't existed in 1972. The sample had been preserved. Frozen. Waiting. In 2023, genealogical DNA databases had exploded. Millions of people had submitted their genetic code to consumer databases. The technology existed now to match Lauren's DNA against those millions of profiles. On November 14, 2023, Detective Chen uploaded Lauren Bennett's DNA to a genealogical matching service. She submitted the request on a Tuesday morning. By Wednesday evening, she had a match. But not to Lauren. The match was to a woman named Jennifer Hartley, age 51, living in California. Jennifer's DNA aligned with the Bennett family samples with a probability so high it exceeded 99.99999%. Either Jennifer Hartley was Lauren Bennett, or she was a direct blood relative, parent, child, or sibling. But Jennifer Hartley had no known siblings. And at age 51, she couldn't be Lauren's child. The math was inescapable. Jennifer Hartley was Lauren Bennett. Chen stared at her computer screen for 5 minutes without blinking. She made the call on Thursday morning. Ms. Hartley? This is Detective Sarah Chen with the Honolulu Police Department. I'm calling about a DNA match we found. Can you tell me, were you adopted as a young child? There was a long silence. Then Jennifer Hartley said something that would reorient everything. Yes. When I was 5 years old. My adoptive parents told me my birth name was Jane. They said it was a private adoption. They never told me anything else. Ms. Hartley, I need to ask you something, and I need you to listen carefully. Do you have any memories of life before age 5? Fragments. Why? Chen took a breath. Because your DNA matches a missing child case from 1972. A girl named Lauren Bennett. She disappeared from a church in Honolulu when she was 5 years old. Ms. Hartley, you are Lauren Bennett. You've been missing for 51 years. The phone went silent. Then Jennifer Hartley asked the question that everyone who'd been waiting for answers wanted answered. What happened to me? Chen had no answer. Not yet. But she had something better than an answer. She had a mystery about to be solved. She had a ghost about to become real. Detective Chen made a decision that would change Jennifer's life irreversibly. She booked a flight to California. She gathered the case file, all 2,347 pages of it. She held a photograph of a 5-year-old girl in a pale pink dress with white daisies. And she went to meet the woman who didn't know she'd been missing. When Detective Chen arrived in California, she sat across from Jennifer Hartley in a coffee shop. Jennifer had asked to meet there, neutral ground, she'd said. Public. Chen held the photograph. The 5-year-old in the pale pink dress with white daisies. This is you, Chen said. This photograph was taken on June 18, 1972. The day you disappeared from First Baptist Church in Honolulu. You've been missing for 51 years. Everyone thought you were dead. Jennifer stared at the photograph. She touched it with her fingertips. I don't remember any of this, she whispered. Do you remember anything from before age 5? Jennifer closed her eyes. Small things. Church, I think. The smell of coconut. The ocean. A woman's voice. Someone saying, they were saying goodbye? Think. I've spent my whole life thinking those were dreams. I never thought they were memories. They were memories, Chen said. Over the next weeks, as Chen conducted intensive interviews with Jennifer, a narrative emerged. Jennifer's memories before age 5 were fragmented, impressions rather than coherent narratives. She remembered heat. She remembered confusion. She remembered a feeling that something had changed. And then, the Hartley family. A childhood. A life. The Hartley family, when contacted, confirmed that they had adopted Jennifer through informal channels in 1972. The adoption had been arranged by a family friend who knew someone. No paperwork. No agency involvement. No legal process. They'd simply been given a child and had never questioned where she came from. In 1972, such things were possible. In 2023, such an arrangement would be recognized for what it was: child trafficking, human trafficking, criminal abduction. But the Hartleys had loved Jennifer. They'd raised her as their own daughter. They'd given her opportunities. They'd created the conditions for a life. And Jennifer loved them back, even as she began to grapple with the fact that love doesn't erase crime. Jennifer's response was haunting. They gave me a family. But they gave that family someone else's daughter. I don't know how to reconcile those truths. Detective Chen traced the family friend who'd arranged the adoption. That person had been deceased for 20 years. But records, fragmentary and buried in old files, eventually identified the person behind the adoption. It was someone with access to the church. Someone trusted by the family. Someone who had been at the social that day. Someone whose connection to Lauren Bennett should have been above suspicion. It was Paul Bennett, Lauren's paternal uncle. And when Chen confronted him with the evidence, he didn't deny anything. He confessed to everything. Paul Bennett was 78 years old when Detective Chen knocked on his door in Honolulu. He'd lived there his entire life. His home was modest. There was nothing about him that suggested he was about to confess to one of Hawaii's most famous unsolved crimes. Chen showed him the DNA evidence. She showed him Jennifer Hartley's photograph. She asked him to explain. Paul Bennett didn't ask for a lawyer. He didn't claim innocence. He simply said, I've been waiting for this knock for 52 years. What followed was a 6-hour confession that would shatter everything about the Bennett family's understanding of what had happened that Sunday in 1972. Paul had taken Lauren from the church bathroom. He'd placed her in his car. He'd driven her to a private adoption broker whose connections he'd cultivated months in advance. Within weeks, Lauren had been given to the Hartley family. A new name. A new identity. A new life. The motive, according to Paul's account, was to save her. My brother was an alcoholic, Paul stated. My sister-in-law was emotionally unstable. I'd watched Lauren flinch when her father raised his voice. I'd seen her mother neglect her. I believed the family was dangerous, and I believed that if I did nothing, she would suffer. So I made a decision. I took her. I gave her to a family who could love her properly. None of these claims could be substantiated. Robert Bennett's drinking problem, if it existed, was not documented. Dorothy's emotional instability was not verified. And yet Paul had been so convinced of the family's unfitness that he'd decided, without legal authority, without family consent, without any legitimate basis, to remove a child from her family. Investigation revealed that Paul had been researching adoption brokers for months before Lauren's disappearance. He had money set aside. He had a plan. On June 18, 1972, he waited for the moment when Lauren would go to the bathroom. He followed her. He took her. The psychological profile that emerged was of a man who had constructed an elaborate justification for a criminal act. Not a monster. Not someone driven by sexual exploitation or ransom. But a man who had believed, genuinely, deeply, wrongly, that he was acting out of love. When asked if he'd ever considered bringing Lauren back once she'd been placed, Paul's response was chilling. She was happy with the Hartleys. By the time I realized what I'd done, she'd bonded with them. I told myself I'd saved her. That's how I lived with it. I told myself I'd saved her. But saving and stealing are not the same thing. Paul Bennett had kidnapped his own niece based on a distorted belief about her parents' fitness. In doing so, he had shattered a family. He had destroyed a community's sense of safety. He had given one girl a life of hidden identity. And he had lived freely for 52 years with the knowledge of that crime. When asked why he never came forward, Paul said, "Because I knew if I did, I'd lose her. And she was the only good thing that came from what I did." Paul Bennett was charged with kidnapping, custodial interference, and human trafficking. Given his age, 78, and his health complications, he faced a reduced sentence. He accepted a plea deal, 10 years in prison, with possibility of parole after 7. The Bennett family faced the agonizing task of reconciling with a man who had fundamentally altered their lives. A man who was family. A man who claimed to have acted from love, but whose actions had erased their daughter for half a century. Jennifer/Lauren, she would eventually legally reclaim her birth name, becoming Lauren Bennett Hartley, struggled with the identity split. For 51 years, she had been Jennifer Hartley. The thought patterns were hers. The memories were hers. The family that raised her was real. But her DNA said something else. Her genetics said she belonged to another family, in another world. On the day of Paul's sentencing, the Bennett family attended court. Lauren's father, now in his 90s, sat in the front row. Jennifer/Lauren sat beside him. They held hands. No one smiled. No one seemed satisfied. Jennifer delivered a victim impact statement that journalists would later describe as heartbreaking in its moral complexity. "You took my family from me. You gave me another family. I love the people who raised me. I mourn the people I never knew. You gave me a gift and committed a crime simultaneously. I don't know how to reconcile those truths. But I have to try. Because if I don't, then what happened to me wins. And I refuse to let it win." Paul Bennett's response at sentencing revealed a man haunted by his own perception of his motives. "I believed I was saving my niece. I understand now that I destroyed her. I destroyed her original family. I created a deception that lasted 52 years. I have lived every day since June 18, 1972, knowing what I did. Prison will not make that better. Nothing will make that better. But I accept this sentence because it is the only justice available for an act that cannot be made just." The verdict was legally conclusive but emotionally incomplete. A child had been taken. A child had been recovered. But the child who had been taken and the woman who had been created in her place were now one person, living in two identities simultaneously, mourning a family she'd never known, grateful for a family built on a crime. Justice had arrived. But it had arrived 52 years late. And it carried with it more questions than answers. In 2024, Jennifer Hartley made the decision to officially reclaim her birth name. She became Lauren Bennett Hartley, a hyphenated identity reflecting both families, both lives, both truths. She spent months with her surviving biological family, her elderly father, her brother, extended relatives she'd never met. They told her stories about the childhood she couldn't remember. They showed her photographs. They wept together, grieved together, tried to stitch together a narrative of a life that had been violently interrupted 52 years earlier. Her first family dinner with the Bennetts was halting and strange. She sat at a table with relatives she didn't know, eating food prepared by hands that had held her as an infant. Her elderly father took her hand and cried. There were no words adequate to the moment. Neither of them had words. "I'm sorry you lost me," Lauren said quietly. "I'm sorry I lost you," her father replied. "But I got you back." The Hartley family that had raised her struggled with a different grief. They loved her fiercely, but they grappled with the realization that they'd been unknowing participants in a crime. They attended family counseling. Some relationships survived the revelation intact. Others fractured irreparably. The truth had recontextualized their entire family history. Lauren pursued therapy to explore the fragmented memories she retained. A smell, a voice, a sensation of being loved by people whose faces she could not recall. These fragments were precious and painful simultaneously, windows into a life she would never fully recover. The media descended. Podcasts devoted episodes to her story. News outlets tracked her journey. She granted a single television interview and then requested privacy. She didn't owe the world her grief. In that interview, conducted in mid-2024, Lauren said something that crystallized the impossible paradox of her existence. "I've had two lives. One was taken from me. One was given to me. I'm grateful for the second. I mourn the first. I don't think those feelings can be reconciled. I think they're just part of who I am now. I'm Lauren and Jennifer. I'm two people who share one body. I'm learning to live with that." When asked if she forgave her uncle, she was silent for a long moment. "I forgive him," she finally said. "But forgiveness doesn't mean what happened was okay. He took my family from me. He stole 52 years. He gave me a good life, but he stole my original one. Those things exist simultaneously, and I have to hold both truths." The case of Lauren Bennett represents both a triumph of modern forensic science and a cautionary tale about invisible crimes. It proves that science can eventually surface truth. It also proves that truth, once surfaced, cannot undo harm. In the United States alone, there are more than 100,000 open missing persons cases. Some will be solved by DNA technology. Many will not. Lauren Bennett's case represents hope for resolution. It also represents the limit of hope, that even when a missing child is found, the damage of her disappearance cannot be erased. Detective Sarah Chin, who reopened the case and saw it through to resolution, was asked if solving it brought her satisfaction. She said, "Satisfaction isn't the right word. Relief, maybe. But also profound sadness that it took 52 years, and that the girl who was found is not the same girl who vanished. The resolution is real. But the harm that was done cannot be resolved." In Honolulu, First Baptist Church installed a memorial near the fellowship hall where Lauren vanished. It contains her photograph, the 5-year-old in the pale pink dress with white daisies, and a plaque that reads, "We see you. We remember you. We will not forget." Paul Bennett died in prison in 2027, at age 81. He'd served 4 years of his 10-year sentence. His last words, according to guards, were, "Tell her I'm sorry." Lauren Bennett Hartley lives a private life in California. She works as a school counselor. She never married. She never had children. She spends every June 18th remembering 2 families, one she was born into and one she was given to, and grieving the collision of those truths. Her father, Robert Bennett, died in 2025. In his will, he left a letter to be read by Lauren after his death. In it, he wrote, "I never got to raise you, but I am proud of the woman you became. You carry 2 families in your heart. That takes courage that I could never have imagined." Lauren Bennett was the ghost that haunted Hawaii for more than 50 years. And like all ghosts, she demanded to be remembered. She demanded to be seen. She demanded that the world acknowledge that some hauntings never truly end. She was found. But some forms of being lost cannot be recovered. Some truths, once known, can only be survived, not solved.